I've been with this company for nearly half my life, and yet in just 10 minutes, I was kicked out like I didn't exist. Not a single thank you. Not even a handshake. Just a cold look from a girl barely in her 20s, someone who's never worked a single day in this industry. But what she didn't know was that the thing she just threw away was the very thing that could determine this company's survival. And I, the man she thought was useless, was the key to it all. My name is Jack Turner, 48 years old, a veteran systems engineer living in Ohio. I started working at Turner Tech, a small tech company, back when it was still run out of an old garage behind the former owner's house, Richard Blake. Back then, Richard was a dreamer full of passion, and I was a young guy obsessed with technology, willing to work through the night just to test out new lines of code. We made it through those tough early years together. From 3 employees to 10, then 50. As the company grew, Richard gradually stepped back from daily operations, but he always told me, "Jack, without you, Turner Tech wouldn't be here today. I'm handing this company over to someone I trust, and that someone is you." Of course, I never saw myself as anyone special. I wasn't a leader, and I didn't have a business mind. I just worked hard and kept the systems running. Every line of code, every algorithm, every server circuit was stored in my memory. I created the internal system PulseNet, the backbone that processes all of the company's data, entirely by hand, almost silently. Things started to change when Richard decided to retire completely and handed full control over to his only daughter, Emily Blake. Emily was smart, held an MBA from Stanford, was a smooth talker and full of ambition. But she also carried that cold arrogance you often see in people who've never failed. On her very first day as CEO, she held a company-wide meeting, talking about restructuring, accelerating digital transformation, and eliminating outdated remnants. I listened to those words and couldn't help but feel amused. I wasn't against innovation. I love tech, after all. But there's a line between improving and destroying. And clearly, Emily didn't see that. 3 days later, I was called into the office. She sat behind her father's old desk, not even pretending to be friendly. No greetings, no small talk. Just one cold sentence. "Jack, thank you for your past contributions, but I don't think you're aligned with the company's future direction." I thought I misheard her. But no, she meant it. I was fired, with no warning, no clear reason, no handover process. Everything ended in just 10 minutes, like tossing out an old machine that's no longer trendy. I left the office with a small box of personal items. As I passed by my former coworkers, many looked down, unable to meet my eyes. No one dared say a word. I didn't blame them. I understood that in a place run by fear and inexperience, everyone was just trying to keep their own seat. But Emily had made a serious mistake, one she didn't even realize at the time. Because the entire PulseNet system, the very technology Turner Tech uses to handle hundreds of thousands of transactions every day, was my intellectual property. And I never signed any document transferring the software rights to the company. From the very beginning, I built it out of trust for Richard, out of love for the company, and because I thought I was part of a family. She didn't know that. She thought she just got rid of an outdated guy. But in reality, she just threw away the only person who held the technological lifeline of Turner Tech. 3 weeks after I left the company, my life slowed down. I started waking up a little earlier, making coffee, sitting on the porch and reading while looking out at the sunny yard. For the first time in over 2 decades, I didn't have to stay up late fixing system bugs, no midnight emails, no urgent messages from the tech team. Honestly, it felt a bit freeing, but also a little empty. Turner Tech used to be my whole world. I didn't hope to return, and I had no plans for revenge. I just thought, one day, they'll realize the most important things aren't in spreadsheets or presentation slides, they're in people. But I didn't expect that day would come sooner than I thought. In the 4th week after I left, I got a call from Derek, an old friend still working at the company, currently the head of the software project team at Turner Tech. His voice was shaky with worry. "Jack, PulseNet just ran into a serious issue. The data's corrupted. Transactions are stuck. Reports aren't running. Emily hired an outside team to fix it, but they're making things worse. I was silent for a moment. I knew this would happen, just didn't think it'd be this soon. Derek, did they touch the core? I asked. They're trying to upgrade it, that's what they're calling it, but the whole admin interface is frozen. And now, big clients are demanding compensation because they can't access their data. Here's the thing, PulseNet isn't a software you can just upgrade like copy-paste. I wrote it in my own way, with a unique architecture, specifically designed for how TurnerTech operates. It's all internally coded, with no detailed documentation. Only I know the core structure. Outsiders, no matter how skilled, can only make things worse if they don't understand the original foundation. 2 days later, I got a call from Emily Blake herself. At first, I thought I misheard. But it was really her. Only this time, her tone wasn't cold like the day of the termination meeting. It sounded panicked. Jack, I understand that. Maybe we didn't handle things the right way. But right now, we need you. Desperately. If we can't get the system back up in the next 48 hours, we'll lose 2 major contracts and face potential lawsuits over data security breaches. All I felt was sadness. Not because she came back asking for help, but because all of this could have been avoided if someone had just listened. I can help, I said. But this time, I'll be working as an independent consultant. I'm no longer a TurnerTech employee. I wasn't doing this out of revenge. But I needed to set boundaries. I needed them, and myself, to understand that real value must be respected properly. Emily agreed immediately. I asked for a consulting contract, with clear terms regarding software usage rights, fees, and my intellectual ownership of PulseNet. The next day, I walked back into the TurnerTech office for the first time in a month. No one said anything as I passed by, but I saw the hopeful looks. They were anxious, worried, scared, just like I had felt the day I was pushed out. Only now, I was the one who could save them. I sat down at the main server. Looking at the messy code left by the outside experts Emily had hired, I sighed. They had tried to patch the system without understanding how it worked, like fixing a jet engine with duct tape. I started step by step. Identified the broken parts. Removed incompatible code. Restored the original structure. And finally, rebuilt the system's protective framework. After nearly 36 hours of work with barely any sleep, PulseNet was back online. Transactions resumed. Reports were running again. Data was saved. Inside the office, the whole team burst into tears. Emily stood there watching me, her eyes filled with gratitude and shame. She walked up slowly and said hesitantly, Jack, I was wrong. I thought I could do everything by the book. But I didn't understand. Some things just can't be replaced. I just smiled. There was nothing more to say. I didn't need an apology. I needed them to learn something from this. After that day, I went home, opened a cold beer, looked up at the sky and told myself, maybe it's time to rewrite my life. No more working in the shadows. No more silent dedication. It's time to take control. 2 weeks after restoring PulseNet, I officially left TurnerTech, for real this time, on my own terms. I declined the offer Emily made to return as Chief Technology Officer, right after the crisis was resolved. I know you could take any position here now, she said, but I hope you'll reconsider. I had thought about it. Long and hard. But I knew exactly what I wanted: freedom. I had spent over 2 decades giving everything to a company I once considered family. And while I never expected recognition, I couldn't keep working in a place where a single misguided decision could cast me aside like a broken tool. So I did something I never dared to even imagine for years. I started my own company. Turner Systems. The first office was just a small room in my house, with a laptop, an old wooden desk, and a few folding chairs. But the vision was crystal clear: to provide tailored software systems for small and mid-sized businesses, especially those stuck with overpriced solutions that didn't meet their real needs. I began by upgrading PulseNet into a new version, PulseNet X, more flexible, more scalable, but still retaining the original core of security and performance. And ironically, my first client was none other than Turner Tech. Emily had changed her tone. No longer the cold, rigid CEO. She called me Mr. Turner. In meetings, listened carefully to every suggestion, and signed a service contract for PulseNet X with clear terms for licensing, maintenance, and service fees. Not only that, she introduced me to 2 other companies, Turner Tech as strategic partners, as a trusted independent tech expert. I truly appreciated that. Not because of the money, but because it showed growth. Meanwhile, Turner Systems grew quickly. I hired 2 young engineers I had worked with before. We didn't follow strict schedules. No pointless meetings. But every line of code was written with passion and deep understanding of real customer needs. We're not aiming to become a billion-dollar company. My only goal is to build something real and decent. 3 months later, Emily invited me to a Turner Tech internal meeting, the first since the crisis. She wanted me to share insights on technology risk management. I showed up, but without slides, without a suit, just myself, with a real story. I told the whole room about the value of understanding the people behind the system. About how a single line of code could save an entire business, if people respected it. About why loyalty shouldn't be measured by age or years of experience, but by will and a spirit of collaboration. When I finished, the room was completely silent. Not because I was a great speaker, but because they had never heard these things from an old-school programmer like me. After the talk, Emily shook my hand, for the first time, sincerely. I used to think technology was something easy to control. But now I understand people are the unpredictable, and most important, factor. I nodded. There was nothing more to say. Because this time, the look in her eyes wasn't dismissive. It was respectful. I left the meeting, walked to the parking lot. It was already getting dark. But inside, I felt brighter than ever. I had once lost everything, my job, my position, my recognition. But by standing up in my own way, I regained not just my dignity, but a whole new beginning. And maybe, the day Emily Blake fired me turned out to be the most important day of my life. Less than a year after I left Turner Tech, Turner Systems had its own office in downtown Seattle, not because I wanted to show off, but because we had more and more clients, and the engineering team had grown to 12 people. These were people I chose not just for their skills, but for their attitude, humble, dedicated, and responsible for every line of code they wrote. We didn't chase big contracts. Every project was custom-built, personalized to each company's real needs. And that's exactly why Turner Systems started gaining recognition among startups and mid-sized businesses. Meanwhile, Turner Tech, my former company, began to run into the very problems I had once warned about. Emily, with her business school management mindset, started aggressively cutting technical staff to boost profit margins. She outsourced coding overseas to get things done faster and cheaper. The problem was, they didn't understand PulseNet. They didn't understand Turner Tech's systems. They didn't understand the internal culture. And more importantly, they didn't care. I heard from a former colleague that the customer service department was overwhelmed because the software kept crashing when integrated with the new payment system. Clients were complaining, employees were burned out. Some left because they no longer felt heard. Emily began to see the gap between leadership theory and real-life practice. She always believed that a good CEO was someone who put the right people in the right roles. But sometimes, the right people aren't on the org chart. They're the ones she once overlooked. One Friday afternoon, while I was reviewing a system design for a small hospital in Portland, I got an email from Emily with the subject: seeking advice. It was long. Longer than any strategy report I'd ever read from her. But this time, there were no charts, no KPIs, no words like synergy or market fit. Just a young woman, 31 years old, sitting at the center of a shaking company, finally admitting that she needed help. Jack, I know now that what you said from the beginning wasn't wrong. I was overconfident, Thought I could do better than anyone if I had the knowledge and authority. But I forgot one thing: technology isn't something you just learn. It takes time, experience, and people. If you don't mind, I'd like to invite you to lunch, not as a client or consultant, but simply as someone who can help me understand the company my father left behind. I finished reading and sat quietly for a few minutes. In all my years of work, I'd seen many people fall because of pride, but very few brave enough to truly reflect on themselves. We met at a small diner in the Fremont area, a place I used to frequent during lunch breaks years ago. Emily arrived first, not dressed in business attire. She looked simple, hair tied back, and for the first time, she didn't look like a CEO, but like someone genuinely ready to learn. I didn't mean to turn the company into a mess, Jack. I honestly thought I could take it to the next level, but the more I tried, the more I realized my father left behind things I didn't yet have the experience to understand. I nodded. No one's born a great leader. But you can learn, if you're willing to listen. She stayed silent. Then looked at me. I've lost many great people, but losing you is what I regret the most. For the first time, I believed she was being sincere. At the end of the meal, Emily hesitantly handed me a stack of documents. This is a new project Turner Tech is experimenting with, a medical data management system. I don't want to outsource anymore. I want Turner Systems to handle the core, if you agree. I opened the documents. Skimmed through. I knew right away, they were venturing into a field where even the smallest mistake could lead to lawsuits and major losses. But I also saw an opportunity, a big step forward. A project that could position Turner Systems as a pioneer in health tech. I looked at Emily. I'll do it. But this time, on one condition. She frowned. What condition? I smiled. We won't be client and vendor. We'll be partners. We'll share risks, make decisions together. And I want my engineering team to have the right to reject any decision from your side, if they believe it poses a risk to the system. Emily was silent for a moment. Then nodded. I agree. Maybe I should start learning how to work as part of a team, instead of just giving orders. I shook her hand. And for the first time, after years of quietly working in the background, I stepped into a new journey, no longer following orders, but building something greater, together. The project was named Athena, a comprehensive medical data management system, integrating AI to analyze symptoms, schedule appointments, and provide early warnings for chronic illnesses. It sounded impressive, but when Turner Systems took it on, what Emily initially gave us was a vague set of documents, a few conceptual models, and an absurdly short deadline. Instead of reacting harshly, I asked just one question. Who on your team has ever built a similar system before? Emily was silent. No one, she admitted. I nodded, then called for the first meeting, not to kick off, but to scrap the entire old plan and start from zero. 3 weeks later, when Emily visited Turner Systems to see the first prototype, she was stunned. Not because the product was perfect, but because of the way we worked. There were no summary reports or PR plans in the meeting room. The walls were covered in hand-drawn system diagrams, sticky notes filled the boards, and a group of young engineers was passionately debating, without anyone calling anyone else boss. Emily walked in, slightly out of place. But then a young programmer turned around and held out a hand. You're Emily, right? I heard you were the one who kept PulseNet alive when everyone else wanted to scrap it. Emily was surprised. It was the first time she'd received genuine recognition from an engineer, not because of her title, but because of the right decision she had made. She smiled, just slightly. But it was a smile free of ego. Project Athena progressed more slowly than expected, but more solidly than ever. We chose to do things right from the start, building an open architecture, testing security at every phase. Emily gradually understood that hitting deadlines was never more important than getting the solution right. She began actively inviting engineers to strategic meetings, something she had never done before. And each time, I saw a new version of Emily, speaking less, listening more, and caring about what others understood, not just what she understood. There was one afternoon I'll never forget. Emily walked into my office, holding an old leather notebook. "I found this in my father's archives." It was Mr. Blake's work journal, the founder of Turner Tech, and Emily's father. She opened to a page in the middle. "Today Jack Turner fixed a system error in just 3 hours. I was wrong to doubt him. Maybe one day, he'll be the one to keep this company on the right path when I'm no longer around." I was speechless. Emily placed the notebook on my desk. Her voice grew quiet. "I used to want to surpass my father. But now I just want to understand him. And more. I realize he always trusted you, more than he trusted me." I didn't know what to say. But in that moment, all the bitterness and frustration from the day I was fired suddenly faded away. No apology needed. No compensation. Just a moment of looking at each other and understanding each other a little more. The Athena project launched its trial version in the 6th month. A small hospital in Tacoma was the first to implement it. Less than 2 weeks later, the hospital director sent a thank you letter, saying the system had helped them detect 2 potential stroke cases early, thanks to the Smart Alert feature. The whole Turner Systems team erupted in joy. Emily came by that day, not in a blazer, and with no prepared speech. She simply raised a glass with everyone, then quietly slipped out after toasting each person. I saw her standing under the awning, alone, the wind gently blowing through her hair. "I understand now," she said without turning around. "Understand what?" I asked. "Why my father chose you as the only person allowed to modify the core code of PulseNet." From that day on, Emily was no longer C.O. Blake in the eyes of the engineers. She became a teammate. Not because of her title, but because she had finally learned the most important lesson in leadership: trusting the right people, and knowing when to let go of ego. Turner Tech and Turner Systems were no longer just client and vendor. We were an alliance. Creating products together, sharing success together. And I, Jack Turner, the man once fired from the company I had dedicated my life to, was now back, not to retaliate, but to rebuild, in a more human way. 3 months after Athena's successful pilot, everything exploded. Tech media started mentioning Turner Tech again, but this time with a new keyword: responsible innovation. At a healthcare technology conference in San Francisco, I stood next to Emily as she was invited to speak. She walked on stage without a printed speech, just an iPad with a few bullet points. And she said exactly what needed to be said. "We don't build technology just to chase speed. We build it to save lives, and to ensure the people in medicine can trust that the tools they use won't betray them." The whole auditorium applauded. A few young CEOs came to shake her hand afterward, asking for technical documents and proposing collaborations. But right after that success, trouble began brewing. The Turner Tech board of shareholders, the same ones who had stayed silent when Emily cleaned house and let go of old engineers, now started asking questions. One of them, Mr. Ronald, an older shareholder and a longtime friend of Blake, called for an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, but Emily recounted it word for word. "Emily, you've nearly doubled the annual software development budget. The Athena project hasn't generated real revenue yet. What exactly are you trying to prove? That emotions matter more than the balance sheet?" She responded calmly. "I'm proving that technology isn't just something to sell, it's something to trust. Stocks don't run on trust, Emily. They run on growth." Another chimed in. "There are rumors Turner Systems effectively controls most of Athena's platform. We want to know, who's really in charge here? You or Jack Turner?" Emily said the room fell silent after that. And then, for the first time, she stood up, without waiting for the session to end. "If any of you think I can't control the path I've chosen, then you should find someone else to be CEO. But if you choose to stay, then understand this: I no longer manage the old way. I won't trade long-term credibility for short-term profit." That night she called me. Her voice was tired. "Do you think I'm being reckless?" I was silent for a few seconds, then said, Emily, you once asked why your father chose me to fix the PulseNet system. But what you didn't know is, he always intended to hand the company to you, not anyone else. Because he believed that, one day, you'd stand up for what's right, even if you had to stand alone. She didn't say anything, but I knew she was crying. A week later, Turner Systems received an invitation from Turner Tech, but this time, it was for a long-term strategic partnership. Emily had managed to convince most of the board to stay the course with Athena as an open, non-profit platform in its initial phase, until the system could prove its real-world value. I was invited to attend the first strategic meeting. But the biggest surprise came when Emily announced, "I nominate Jack Turner as the interim chief technology officer for the entire Athena system, both Turner Tech and Turner Systems." The room was stunned. "I won't sit on both sides at once. I'll hold an independent position and take full technical responsibility. But I have one condition: no shareholder interference in the system's design structure." This time, Ronald was the first to stand. He walked up to me and extended his hand. "Blake trusted you. Maybe it's time we do too." From that day forward, Turner Tech and Turner Systems began writing a new chapter, through real collaboration, not compromise. Emily learned how to negotiate without giving up core values. I learned how to lead not from the top, but from the technical center, where keystrokes and logical debates were what truly determined success. Athena began to grow. Over 10 hospitals on the West Coast started using it, and one reported that, for the first time in 5 years, medical input errors had dropped by 38%. It was no longer just a system. Athena had become proof that technology can have a conscience. And Turner Tech, once on the brink of collapse, had come back to life, not for profit, but for trust. One late afternoon, Emily and I sat again at the old cafe, the place where she once asked me for advice over lunch. She looked at me, half joking, half serious. "Jack, you know, back then I used to think you were a stubborn, slow guy clinging to the past." I laughed. "And I used to think you were a spoiled, arrogant girl who liked giving orders more than learning." She smiled, gently and honestly. "Good thing we were both wrong." Athena was no longer just a project. It had become a movement in the health tech world. Major hospitals in New York, Boston, and even Vancouver began reaching out, asking to pilot integrations. They weren't looking for just software, they were looking for an ecosystem where doctors, patients, and engineers could work together, free from the pressure of profit and advertising. We could barely keep up. Dev teams were working in shifts, around the clock. Emily and I spent many nights sleeping at the office. And then came the call that made everything pause. The largest health tech corporation in America, Medtronic, offered to acquire the entire Athena system for $780 million. They wanted full ownership of the software, data infrastructure, and development team, and promised to keep the Athena brand for the first 5 years. An offer you can't refuse, at least by investor standards. Emily was invited to meet Medtronic's executive board in Chicago. She turned to me, eyes uncertain. "What do you think?" I looked at her for a moment, then simply said, "You already know the answer, don't you?" Only one person took the flight to Chicago, Emily. I stayed in Seattle, continuing to oversee the security patch rollout for a hospital system in Oregon. That evening, I received an email with just 9 words. "Thank you for not selling yourself out." When Emily returned, she walked into Turner Systems' meeting room like a different person. No more hesitation. No more eyes looking for approval. She sat down in the middle of the morning engineering meeting, lifted her coffee like just another member of the team. And then she said, "I turned it down." Silence. A young engineer asked, "Why?" "That kind of money could set you for life." Emily smiled. "Precisely because I don't just want to live, I want to live with purpose." Turning down Medtronic wasn't an easy decision. We had to face skepticism from investors. Turner Tech's stock dropped 7% within a week. But that's when the unexpected began to happen. The U.S. Department of Health officially invited Turner Tech and Turner Systems to become strategic partners in the National Digital Health Reform Program. It brought government funding, legal endorsement, and, most importantly, formal recognition. Athena was no longer a product. It became a national platform. The media called Emily the female CEO who stood up to Silicon Valley. And me? I declined to appear on any magazine covers. Instead, I was invited to technical universities to lecture on the topic. Human-centered technology, building not to sell. 1 year after turning down the buyout, Athena had been deployed in 83 hospitals across North America. The system reduced misdiagnosis time due to input errors by 41% and saved the public healthcare sector millions of dollars each year. One day, Emily came to my office carrying a package. Inside was her father Blake's final handwritten letter, delivered through his lawyer with specific instructions, to be handed over only when Athena reached 50 hospitals. I read it with her. The letter said, "My daughter, if one day you find the courage to admit your mistakes and start again, you'll understand this. A company doesn't need a brilliant leader, it needs a decent human being willing to step back so others can move forward. And if that day comes, hand the company to the most trustworthy person you've ever met." Emily looked at me. "He didn't write a name. But you know who he meant, don't you?" I nodded, then quietly declined. "You're the one who did what your father couldn't, change without losing yourself." Athena continues to grow. But now, there's no pressure to scale for the sake of shares. We do it for passion, for ideals, and for the trust of thousands of doctors and patients out there. And I, Jack Turner, the man once fired by his boss's daughter, now serve as the company's senior technical advisor. Not for power. Not for fame. But for something far more valuable: trust. The story of Jack and Emily isn't just about overcoming misunderstandings and prejudice. It's proof that perseverance, kindness, and belief in human values can lead to something extraordinary. In today's world of competition and calculation, sometimes the most important thing isn't speed or profit, but the courage to choose the right path, even if you walk it alone. True success doesn't lie in owning more, but in not losing yourself among the easy choices. What do you think about Emily's decision and Jack's journey? Were they right to hold on to their ideals instead of selling out for millions? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life and family.